Imagine waking up one day and realizing that the person staring back at you in the mirror is not the person you were meant to be. You feel a strange emptiness, as if life has been happening to you rather than through you. Every decision, every choice, every relationship seems like a repetition of the same patterns, leaving you frustrated, exhausted, and disconnected from yourself. What if I told you that the life you've been waiting for, the peace, the clarity, the strength, has been inside you all along, buried beneath fear, doubt, and habit? What if I told you that rebuilding yourself is not about running from who you were, but about embracing every piece of your past, every shadow, every hidden desire, and transforming it into power? Tonight, I want to take you on a journey, not to a place in the world, but to a place within, a place where courage meets reflection, where pain meets purpose, and where the person you thought you lost is waiting to be rediscovered. This is the journey of rebuilding yourself, and it begins with one simple yet terrifying step: looking inward and facing the truth that has been hiding in the shadows of your own heart. Are you ready to take that step? Because the person you were meant to be is waiting. Facing the darkness within is the first and most difficult step in the journey of rebuilding yourself, because it demands that you look at the parts of you that you've avoided for years, the corners of your mind where pain, fear, anger, and regret have been quietly growing. Most people run from their own darkness because it is uncomfortable to face the truth about what lies within. It is easier to keep yourself distracted, to chase noise, attention, and movement, than to sit in silence and listen to what your soul has been trying to tell you. But silence is where the real answers live. It is in that stillness that you begin to realize how much of yourself you've hidden behind walls built from fear of rejection, shame from past mistakes, or the need to appear strong. Rebuilding yourself begins the moment you stop running from your own reflection and start having the courage to meet it with honesty. Inside every person, there are two sides constantly in conflict. One side seeks light, growth, and peace, while the other is filled with impulses, shadows, and buried emotions. To face the darkness within means to acknowledge that both exist and both are part of who you are. Your anger, jealousy, insecurities, and guilt are not your enemies. They are unhealed parts of you asking for attention. Every wound has a voice, and when you silence that voice for too long, it begins to control your behavior from the background. That is why sometimes you react without understanding why you sabotage yourself or repeat the same mistakes again and again. It is not because you are broken beyond repair, but because there are parts of you you've never truly faced. Facing them is not about judgment, but understanding. When you begin this process, you may feel lost, even frightened, because everything you thought you knew about yourself starts to shift. You realize how much of your identity was built on avoiding discomfort, on pretending to be fine when you were not, on keeping busy to avoid feeling empty. But if you have the courage to stay in that darkness long enough, something powerful begins to happen. You start to see patterns that once controlled your life. You begin to understand why certain people, situations, or habits kept returning. The darkness becomes a mirror, reflecting everything that was hidden from you. And once you see it, you cannot go back to blindness. Awareness changes everything. Facing the darkness within is not an act of weakness, it is the highest form of strength. It takes more courage to look within than to conquer anything outside yourself. The battles inside are silent, but the most transformative. Many people spend their entire lives avoiding these inner battles, convincing themselves that happiness will come from external success, money, love, or approval. But none of those things can fill the emptiness created by a disconnection from yourself. The moment you begin to face what you've been avoiding, you start to heal from the inside out. The darkness no longer controls you. It becomes your teacher. It shows you where you are wounded and where you must grow. When you sit with your pain instead of denying it, you begin to see that it has something to teach you. Every fear has a root. Maybe it was a childhood experience, a heartbreak or a failure that left a scar. You can't erase those memories, but you can understand them and reclaim the power they took from you. Rebuilding yourself requires that you transform pain into wisdom, not by forgetting it, but by learning from it. This is how strength is born, not from pretending to be unshaken, but from being honest about what broke you and using that truth as a foundation to rise again. The darkness also reveals your hidden potential. Inside your pain lies your passion, creativity, and empathy. People who have suffered deeply often understand life more profoundly. Their hearts become more compassionate, their minds more open, their spirits more resilient. But this transformation only happens when you stop running from the darkness and instead walk through it with awareness. You begin to realize that everything you feared about yourself, the anger, the sadness, the guilt, can be transformed into fuel for your growth. What once felt like weakness becomes strength because it has taught you endurance and depth. Facing your darkness also frees you from judgment. When you understand your own pain, you stop judging others for theirs. You begin to see that everyone is fighting battles you cannot see, carrying burdens you cannot measure. This realization brings humility and peace. You stop seeking perfection in yourself or others, because you recognize that imperfection is what makes growth possible. In this acceptance, you become whole again. The process is not linear. Some days the darkness will feel overwhelming. You may feel like you are regressing, that old habits and emotions are returning, but every time you face them, you become stronger. Every time you choose awareness over avoidance, you reclaim a piece of your soul. This is the slow art of rebuilding yourself from the inside. It is not about becoming someone new, but about remembering who you truly are beneath the noise and fear. Rebuilding yourself through facing the darkness is a sacred journey. It strips away illusions, false identities, and external attachments until all that remains is the truth. And the truth, though painful at first, is what sets you free. Once you have faced your inner darkness, you are no longer afraid of the world because you have already faced the most terrifying place of all, yourself. From there, everything else becomes possible. Accepting the broken pieces of yourself is the second step toward rebuilding your life, because healing is not about replacing who you were, but understanding that every fracture, every scar, and every painful memory holds meaning. Most people spend their lives trying to escape their brokenness. They bury mistakes under new achievements, hide their pain behind smiles, and pretend that the past doesn't exist. But what they don't realize is that running from the broken parts of yourself only keeps you fragmented. You cannot build a whole life on pieces you refuse to acknowledge. To truly rebuild, you must sit with the parts of you that hurt, the memories that make you uncomfortable, and the emotions you've labeled as weakness. There is beauty in imperfection, but it takes time to see it. The broken pieces of your life, the failures, heartbreaks, and disappointments, are not signs that you are unworthy or incapable. They are proof that you have lived, that you have tried, and that you have survived. Each scar tells a story of something you've overcome. To accept the broken pieces is to accept your humanity. It means allowing yourself to feel pain without judgment, to acknowledge mistakes without shame, and to see your past not as a curse, but as a teacher. The world often teaches you to hide your wounds, to look perfect, to move on quickly, but healing cannot be rushed. Acceptance begins when you stop pretending that everything is fine and start admitting that you are still learning how to be whole. When you look at yourself with honesty, you may see cracks everywhere. You may see relationships that failed, dreams that collapsed, and moments when you disappointed yourself or others. Those cracks can make you feel weak, but in truth, they are what make you real. People who have never been broken rarely understand depth. They live on the surface of life, untouched by its storms. But those who have been shattered and survived carry a wisdom that cannot be learned from comfort. Accepting your broken pieces means realizing that even though something within you has changed, it does not mean you are less valuable. Just as a cracked vase can still hold flowers, a wounded heart can still love, and a scarred soul can still shine. To rebuild yourself, you must give meaning to your pain instead of letting it define you. Every wound carries a lesson. The betrayal that broke your trust teaches you about boundaries. The failure that crushed your confidence teaches you resilience. The loss that tore your heart open teaches you compassion. When you stop seeing your past as something that happened to you and begin to see it as something that shaped you, you reclaim your power. Acceptance turns suffering into strength because it transforms pain into understanding. There will always be people who remind you of your past or the things you've done wrong. They may try to define you by your lowest moments, but you must remember that the power to rebuild lies within you, not in their judgment. When you accept yourself fully, no one can use your past against you. You begin to live from a place of authenticity instead of fear. The same broken pieces that once made you ashamed become the foundation for your new self. They remind you of your endurance, your growth, and your ability to transform pain into purpose. It's not easy to accept the parts of you that you dislike. Sometimes the hardest person to forgive is yourself. You might look back and wish you had chosen differently, loved better, or tried harder, but guilt keeps you tied to a version of yourself that no longer exists. Acceptance means forgiving the person you were when you didn't know better. It means recognizing that every choice, even the wrong ones, brought you to this point of awareness. Without those experiences, you wouldn't have the wisdom you have now. The past may have left marks, but those marks are not there to remind you of your weakness. They are reminders of your capacity to rise again. Accepting your broken pieces also changes how you see others. When you stop judging yourself for your flaws, you stop judging others for theirs. Compassion grows naturally when you realize that everyone is carrying something unseen. You understand that brokenness is universal, that no one escapes life without pain. This understanding allows you to connect with others more deeply because you see them not as perfect beings, but as fellow travelers on the same path of healing and growth. The act of acceptance is not passive. It doesn't mean you give up or stop trying to improve. It means you build from where you are, not from who you pretend to be. You begin to care for yourself like you would for someone you love. You stop fighting against your pain and start listening to it. You stop wishing your past was different and start using it as fuel for transformation. Every broken piece becomes a part of your mosaic, a reflection of your journey, and together they form something uniquely beautiful, something only you could create. Rebuilding yourself after accepting your brokenness is like turning shattered glass into a stained glass window. The light that once hurt your eyes now passes through your cracks, creating colors you never knew existed. The same pieces that once made you feel incomplete become the reason you shine. This is the quiet miracle of acceptance. It doesn't erase what happened, it transforms the meaning of it. Through this transformation, you begin to see that you were never truly broken, only rearranged into someone wiser, stronger, and more whole than before. Discovering the hidden self is the heart of personal transformation because within every person lies a deeper identity that has been buried beneath years of conditioning, expectations, and noise. From the moment you are born, the world begins to shape you. Parents teach you what is right and wrong, society tells you what success looks like, and peers influence how you should think, speak, and act. Slowly, without even realizing it, you begin to drift away from your true self. You learn to wear masks to fit in, to please others, and to be accepted. Over time, you forget that there was once a version of you that was pure, spontaneous, and free. To discover the hidden self is to strip away the layers of imitation and rediscover the person who exists beneath all the roles you play. The hidden self is not lost, it is simply silent. It waits patiently for you to stop performing and start listening. But listening to your inner voice in a world filled with noise is not easy. You are constantly surrounded by distractions, by people telling you what you should be, and by fears that whisper what you should not do. The hidden self does not shout. It speaks softly through intuition, through the quiet tug in your heart that tells you something is missing, even when everything seems fine. It's that feeling of emptiness that no achievement or relationship can fill. It's the unease you feel when you realize that you've been living a life that doesn't belong to you. The moment you begin to sense that disconnection is the moment your journey inward begins. Discovering the hidden self requires courage because it asks you to question everything you thought you knew about yourself. You must be willing to let go of false identities, the achiever, the caretaker, the perfectionist, the people-pleaser, that you've built for survival. These identities once protected you from pain and rejection, but they also imprisoned you in a version of yourself that is not fully alive. When you remove these masks, you might feel exposed and vulnerable because the hidden self is raw and real. It does not care about appearances or approval. It is more interested in truth than in comfort. The journey inward often begins with discomfort. You start noticing how often your actions are driven by fear rather than love. You see how you say yes when you want to say no, how you stay silent when your soul wants to speak, and how you follow paths chosen by others instead of forging your own. These realizations can be painful, but they are necessary. They are signs that your hidden self is awakening, pushing you to break free from the illusions that have kept you small. The more you listen to this inner voice, the clearer it becomes. You begin to understand what truly matters to you, not what the world says should matter. The hidden self holds your true desires, your creativity, and your purpose. It is the part of you that dreams without limits, that longs to express itself freely, and that feels deeply connected to life. But for many people, this self is buried under years of fear, shame, and conformity. They suppress their passions because they fear failure. They silence their emotions because they were told to be strong. They hide their true selves because being authentic once led to rejection. Yet the pain of denying who you are eventually becomes heavier than the fear of being seen. The moment you decide to honor your hidden self is the moment you begin to rebuild your life from authenticity. When you reconnect with your hidden self, everything begins to shift. Your choices become clearer because they align with your truth rather than with expectation. You start setting boundaries, not out of anger, but out of respect for your peace. You attract people who resonate with your real energy, not with the masks you used to wear. Even your failures begin to feel different because they no longer define your worth. They simply guide you toward greater understanding. The hidden self teaches you that fulfillment is not found in external success, but in inner alignment. When what you think, feel, and do are in harmony, life feels lighter and more meaningful. Discovering the hidden self also means making peace with your shadow, the parts of you that you've rejected. You cannot truly know yourself if you only accept the light and deny the darkness. The hidden self is whole. It embraces both strength and vulnerability, joy and sadness, confidence and doubt. When you stop running from your flaws, they lose their power over you. You begin to see that your imperfections make you real, that your struggles give you depth, and that your emotions, even the painful ones, are messages guiding you back home to yourself. This journey is not a one-time revelation, but a lifelong practice. The hidden self reveals itself slowly, layer by layer, as you grow more self-aware. Every experience, whether joyful or painful, brings you closer to it. Solitude becomes a sanctuary because in quiet moments you can hear your own thoughts clearly. Reflection, writing, meditation, and time in nature help silence the noise of the world so that your inner voice can rise again. You start noticing synchronicities, small moments of alignment that remind you that you're on the right path. The universe begins to mirror your inner clarity through peace, opportunities, and a sense of purpose that feels natural rather than forced. When you discover the hidden self, you stop living to impress and start living to express. You realize that you don't need to chase validation because your worth is not determined by anyone's opinion. The hidden self carries the quiet confidence of someone who knows who they are and what they stand for. It doesn't seek to dominate or prove, it simply exists in truth. That truth is unshakable because it comes from within, not from external recognition. The process of discovering the hidden self transforms how you see life. You begin to understand that every challenge, heartbreak, and loss was never meant to destroy you, but to strip away what was false so that the real you could emerge. You see that the person you were searching for was never out there. It was always inside you, waiting to be remembered. And once you reconnect with that hidden self, you begin to live not as a fragment trying to fit in, but as a whole being, finally free to become who you were always meant to be. To rebuild yourself, you must understand that true growth does not come from escaping the past, but from integrating it into who you are. Many people believe that starting over means erasing everything that once was, pretending old memories and mistakes never happened. But transformation is not about creating a new version of yourself from nothing. It is about taking everything you've experienced, the pain and the joy, the failures and the victories, and using them as the raw material to build a stronger foundation. You cannot rebuild by running away from what you once were. You rebuild by facing it, accepting it, and learning from it. Integration is the key to wholeness. When you try to escape your past, you create a division within yourself. One part of you moves forward, but another part remains stuck, unhealed, and unheard. You can change your surroundings, your relationships, even your identity, but until you face the unresolved emotions that live inside you, they will follow you wherever you go. Running away gives temporary relief, but it doesn't bring peace. You can move to a new place or start a new life, but eventually the same feelings resurface in different forms. Because you didn't integrate what happened, you just buried it deeper. Integration means looking at your past without judgment and asking, what did... Detaching from the masks you wear is one of the most important parts of rebuilding yourself, because the person you present to the world is often not the person you truly are. From a young age, you begin to build these masks unconsciously. You learn which behaviors earn you love, which opinions keep you safe, and which emotions are acceptable to express. Over time, you create versions of yourself that fit into every situation. The confident one, the strong one, the agreeable one, the funny one. These masks protect you from rejection and judgment, but they also separate you from your authentic self. You become so used to pretending that you forget who you were before you started hiding. Rebuilding yourself requires peeling away these layers until only the real you remains. The mask becomes heavier the longer you wear it. At first it feels like safety, but after a while it turns into suffocation. You start living according to expectations instead of desires. You say what others want to hear instead of what your heart truly believes. You chase approval rather than purpose. And eventually you feel empty because the life you're living no longer feels like your own. Many people mistake this emptiness for failure, but it's not failure. It's a signal from your soul that you've drifted too far from your truth. The more you wear your masks, the more distant you become from your inner voice. That is why at some point you must make the choice to stop performing and start being. Taking off the mask is not easy. It feels like losing protection, like standing naked in front of the world. You fear that if people saw the real you, your insecurities, your flaws, your doubts, they would not accept you. But what you don't realize is that the right people can only love you when you show them who you really are. The mask may attract attention, but only authenticity builds connection. The moment you start being honest about your feelings, your struggles, and your truth, you begin to attract relationships, opportunities, and experiences that match your real energy. The world starts responding not to your performance, but to your presence. Detaching from the masks also means letting go of the need to control how others see you. You stop living for validation and start living for meaning. When your worth no longer depends on approval, you find freedom. You no longer chase people or situations that don't align with your truth, because you understand that losing them is better than losing yourself. This detachment allows you to live with peace rather than pressure. You stop asking, "What will they think of me?" and start asking, "Does this feel true to who I am?" That shift changes everything. When you begin to live without masks, life feels both lighter and deeper. You rediscover parts of yourself you had forgotten: the spontaneous laughter, the curiosity, the creativity, the honesty. You start doing things not because they make sense to others, but because they bring you joy. You speak your truth, even when it shakes your voice. You stop trying to fit in, because you realize that being real matters more than being accepted. This authenticity becomes your strength, because it cannot be taken away from you. The world can misunderstand or judge you, but as long as you are true to yourself, you remain unshaken. Removing the mask also reveals your vulnerability, and that vulnerability is not weakness. It is where your real power lives. When you allow yourself to be seen as you are, you give others permission to do the same. You begin to connect on a soul level rather than through superficial roles. People feel your honesty, your depth, your sincerity, and that creates bonds that are real and lasting. Vulnerability builds trust, both with yourself and with others. It teaches you that you do not need to be perfect to be worthy of love. You only need to be genuine. Living without masks doesn't mean rejecting every role you play. It means you no longer let those roles define you. You can be a student, a friend, a worker, or a leader, but beneath all those titles, you know who you truly are. The roles change, but your essence remains constant. You stop identifying with temporary identities and start aligning with your inner truth. This brings clarity and stability, because no matter what happens around you, you know what you stand for. As you detach from the masks, you learn to appreciate simplicity. You no longer need to impress, explain, or prove. You start showing up as yourself, and that is enough. You realize that the greatest peace comes not from perfection, but from authenticity. In this state, rebuilding yourself becomes natural, because you are no longer building on false foundations. You are building on truth. And when your life is rooted in truth, it becomes unshakable, no matter what storms come your way. Rebirth through self-awareness is the moment when transformation truly begins, when you stop living on autopilot and start living with intention. Most people drift through life, reacting to circumstances, repeating old patterns and calling it fate. They rarely pause to ask themselves why they think the way they do, why they feel certain emotions, or why they keep finding themselves in the same painful situations. Self-awareness is the key that breaks this cycle. It is the mirror that shows you both your light and your shadow, your strengths and your wounds. Rebirth happens when you choose to look into that mirror with honesty instead of fear. It is not an instant change, but a slow awakening, a process of rediscovering who you truly are beneath years of conditioning, expectation, and habit. Self-awareness begins with observation. You start to notice the patterns in your life, the way you respond to stress, the triggers that cause anger, the situations that make you feel small. At first, this awareness can be uncomfortable because it reveals truths you might not want to face. You begin to see how much of your life has been controlled by your past, how your reactions often come from old wounds rather than present realities. But awareness is never the enemy. Ignorance is. When you can see yourself clearly, you gain the power to choose differently. You begin to act from consciousness instead of compulsion. And that is where rebirth starts to unfold. Through self-awareness, you start peeling away illusions. You realize that many of your beliefs were never truly yours. They were given to you by family, culture, or society, and you accepted them without question. You were told what success means, how love should look, what failure feels like, and who you are supposed to be. Self-awareness challenges those inherited definitions. It asks, is this really what I believe? Or is this what I was told to believe? When you start asking those questions, the walls that once confined you begin to crumble. You no longer measure your worth by external standards, because you understand that real freedom lies in defining life on your own terms. The process of self-awareness can be painful because it forces you to take responsibility for your life. It is easier to blame others, to say you are the way you are because of someone else's actions. But rebirth demands ownership. It asks you to look at how your thoughts and choices have shaped your reality. This responsibility is not about guilt, but empowerment. Once you accept that you are the creator of your experience, you realize that you also hold the power to change it. You no longer see yourself as a victim of life, but as an active participant in it. That shift in perception is the essence of rebirth. It turns helplessness into strength and confusion into clarity. With growing awareness comes compassion. As you understand yourself better, you stop being so harsh on yourself for past mistakes. You see that every wrong turn was part of your evolution, that every wound guided you toward wisdom. This compassion softens you. It opens your heart not only toward yourself, but also toward others. You begin to understand that everyone is struggling to become conscious. Everyone is fighting invisible battles. Judgment fades, and empathy takes its place. Through awareness, you stop seeking perfection and start embracing humanity. Rebirth through self-awareness also transforms your relationship with time. You stop living in regret over the past and fear of the future because awareness anchors you in the present. You become more attentive to the now, to your breath, your surroundings, your thoughts. In this state of mindfulness, even the smallest moments begin to feel alive. A sunrise, a conversation, or a simple act of kindness carries meaning because you are fully present to experience it. Life stops feeling like a race and begins to feel like a journey. As awareness deepens, you begin to notice how energy flows through your life. You start releasing what no longer serves you. Habits, people, environments, and thoughts that drain your spirit. You learn to protect your peace instead of constantly trying to please others. You start making choices that align with your authentic values, and each choice brings you closer to balance. Slowly, the old version of you begins to fade. You no longer react from fear, you respond from understanding. You no longer chase validation, you create meaning. This is what rebirth feels like. Not a dramatic transformation, but a quiet, steady awakening into truth. In this rebirth, you realize that awareness itself is freedom. You no longer need to escape life or change everything outside you. You only need to see clearly within. Once you understand yourself, the world stops controlling you because you know how to navigate it with wisdom. You carry peace wherever you go because it comes from within, not from circumstances. The more you live in this awareness, the more alive you feel. Every moment becomes an opportunity to grow, to learn, to evolve. And through that ongoing awareness, you are constantly being reborn into a truer, stronger, and more awakened version of yourself. As we come to the end of this journey together, I want you to remember that rebuilding yourself is not a one-time event. It is a lifelong process of courage, reflection, and growth. Every shadow you face, every mask you remove, every broken piece you embrace, and every step you take towards self-awareness brings you closer to the truest version of yourself. You have the power to turn your pain into wisdom, your fear into strength, and your past into a foundation for a brighter future. Embrace the journey, honor the process, and trust that every effort you make to understand and transform yourself matters. You are not defined by your mistakes, your failures, or the expectations of others. You are defined by your willingness to rise, evolve, and create a life that is authentic to who you truly are. Good luck as you take these steps forward. May courage guide your path, may clarity light your way, and may your journey of rebuilding bring you the peace, strength, and fulfillment you deserve. Thank you for listening, thank you for reflecting, and thank you for daring to begin the process of becoming the best version of yourself.